My name is Bob Janes, and I've worked in and around museums for nearly 35 years as a museum director, author, consultant, editor, board member, and volunteer. And I'm currently the editor-in-chief of the journal Museum Management and Curatorship. I recently published a book called Museums in a Troubled World, Renewal, Irrelevance, or Collapse, wherein I question the contemporary relevance of museums. And a senior museum director said to me recently, "Bob, if you wanted to be essential, you should have become an oncologist." Well, I don't happen to agree with that perspective, and here's why. All of us know that planet Earth and our global civilization now confront a variety of issues that threaten the very existence of both. And these issues range from climate change to global poverty, not to mention the countless issues that confront the health and well-being of individual communities around the world. There's nothing new about these challenges, and there's a growing literature which offers dire warnings and solutions to all of these problems. However, museums are rarely, if ever, mentioned in this literature, which causes me to conclude that the irrelevance of museums as social institutions is a matter of record. I also submit that the majority of museums have largely ignored a broader commitment to the world in which they live and work, and are held increasingly captive by market-based ideology and the economic imperatives of the marketplace, as well as their own internally driven agendas. Museum practitioners and museum academics are seemingly preoccupied with method and process, and at getting better and better at what they're already doing well. And this is simply not enough for museums to do their work better. They have to ask once again what their real work should be. And of particular importance in all of these things is that the difficulties and uncertainties threatening museums not only originate in the world at large, but are also created by museums themselves. And one of the most insidious external challenges is this growing adherence to the marketplace and to corporatism. And I think this preoccupation with quantitative performance measures only has created all kinds of excesses, including blockbuster exhibitions, vanity architecture, and money as the measure of worth. In a world of local, national, and global issues, it's common sense to me to expect that public funding will eventually be directed to address these economic, social, and cultural issues. So those museums that remain committed to consumption, to edutainment, and to ancillary education won't any longer be sustainable in this context. And as we know, many museums aren't sustainable now. And this situation is oddly reminiscent of a story about the Battle of the Little Bighorn, that most famous action in the American Indian Wars, when the Lakota and the Northern Cheyenne decimated the U.S. 7th Cavalry. As the story goes, a female elder walked up to the corpse of General Custer and drove a sewing awl through his ear into his skull, hoping that he might hear better in the next world. So must we conclude that museums are as inattentive as the General Custer? As we all know, in addition to the external challenges, museums also suffer from a host of internal challenges, and foremost among these being the collections, I think. With unlimited collections growth and the lack of resources for taking care of these things, one must really ask what is going on. It's as if the museum community is in an everlasting state of denial and won't confront this most sacred of the museum cows. And this also reminds me of a story about the sailors of the British Royal Navy's Franklin expedition in search of the Northwest Passage. The two expedition ships were trapped in the ice in the Canadian Arctic and abandoned in 1848. And the men set out in search of the mainland and rescue. They were pulling very heavy sledges by hand, laden with the best of Victorian material culture: watches, spectacles, tools, books, canvas, silver cutlery, and so forth. Regrettably, the entire expedition of 129 men perished of scurvy, starvation, and exhaustion. And I repeat, exhaustion, because museums, with their own heavy sledges and their growing exhaustion, need not suffer a similar fate if only there would be sufficient collective will to confront some of these conventional practices. So here's hoping that museums won't suffer the fate of the inattentive General Custer or of the obsessive Franklin expedition. So I challenge all museum workers to explore your assumptions, explore your particular strengths and attributes, as well as your obligations, and strengthen your commitment to making a difference in a world with unprecedented global environmental and social issues. The time to do so grows short. Thank you very much, and all the best in your important work.